Hello and welcome to Catholic Focus. My name is Kudakwasha Matambo. Today on our program, we are talking to the new Secretary General of the Zimbabwe Catholic Bishops' Conference, Father Tryvis Moyo, to try and understand his work and also the work of the Zimbabwe Bishops' Conference. Father Tryvis, welcome to Catholic Focus.
Thank you, Kuda. Thank you for having me.
Yes. People out there want to understand what the Catholic Bishops' Conference is and what work you are doing. But perhaps let's start with your work as the Secretary General. You replaced Father Frederick Chiromba as the Secretary General, who has been working in the conference for a long time. How is your work here and what do you do?
Well, I'm learning the ropes, but my work is well cut out. So I'm following after a great figure who has shaped the face of the conference, and he has established the structures. And in liaison with the other conferences in the region, I get to understand my work. Simply put, the work of the Secretary General, or should I say the work of the Secretariat, is to hold the institutional memory of the church in Zimbabwe, is to be the leverage for the business of the bishops in the country. This is the office of contact in terms of communication. And whatever happens within the church, in one way or the other, passes through this office or ends up in this office. So that's how important the office is.
Okay, but perhaps before we talk about the business of the bishops, let's talk about your journey. You've been a priest working in different environments, and now you're working in more for an administrative role at the Bishops' Conference. How has that journey, that transition been for you?
Well, coming from my background as a Redemptorist and with our focus mainly on the poor and the most abandoned, the explicit proclamation of the word, at first I found it very confining to be sitting in an office and trying to do administrative work. But in one way or the other, I was doing administrative work even in our congregation. As a parish priest, there is an element of that. As a part of the leadership in the African conference for the Redemptorists, I was also into administration. So it's not new, though I find myself confined more to the office nowadays than I would have been.
Mm-hmm. You say your duty here is to, to hold the institutional memory, but also, to coordinate the business of the bishops. What is the bishop's goal for the church? What is their dream for the church in Zimbabwe?
Well, I think it's captured in their vision statement. They seek a church that is all embracive, a church that helps further reconciliation in the land, and a church that embraces everyone. So when you look at the Secretariat and the various commissions, I think those commissions, 13 of them, speak of the reality and the vision of the bishops in the church. We have an education secretariat, we have Caritas, which is more or less the social arm, we have justice and peace, we have the pastoral dimension under the pastoral center, we have marriage and family, we have the National Marriage Tribunal, just to name but a few.
Mm-hmm. And if you are to put yourself in that particular context, what do you think your most important or strategic goal is?
I think coordination is one of them. And every 4 years, the bishops come up with a strategic plan. And it's that strategic plan that informs my job, to try and see that it is implemented. So the strategic plan captures their vision. And that vision is what I run with. And I try and have all these other commissions in a way following the vision.
Mm-hmm. One of the important roles of the bishops is to to lay out a pastoral plan, to lay out a pastoral framework for how people should be ministered to. And in that context, we are having a synod on synodality process. How do you see that process, how it has been coordinated in terms of the local church?
I think the synod on synodality was a first in many areas. Pope Francis brought something that was unheard of before, how the consultations went to the grassroots. And I think this is reflected in the continental document. It reflects the desires, the ambitions, the anxieties of the people in the different parts of the world. But when you read the document, not even a single document of the church is quoted. What you hear are the reflections of the people. And as a country, I think we tried our best to let our people speak. And the pastors, the bishops listened, and they are still continuing with that listening. And so whatever will come out of the synod is informed by what the people have said.
Are there any particular groups of people or communities, societies that you think have not been listened to in this process, or that's or a group that needs to make their voices heard much louder?
Yes, wherever you have a minority, even if they speak louder, their voices are drowned by the majority. But the synod said to us, let's go out to those on the margins. Let's hear what they say. Let's consult other churches so that they may tell us what they think of us. So yes, there are so many groups. The disabled, for example, the LGBTs, and all that. So there are so many people who somehow have not been heard, or if they have been heard, none has taken their cause further. And it's those groups that the synod says they can teach us a lot. Usually when people were doing consultation in the past synods, we're heading for the experts. Maybe you will have your gurus in theology, canon law, moral theology, and other areas in the church life, speaking and informing the synod. But this time it's more pastoral. Let's have those who are the recipients of the members of the clergy, is ministry, also participating and telling us how we ought to minister and how we can journey together as the people of God. And I think the synod on synodality has stressed on the point of working together.
Now the discussions are at a continental stage, but as a bishops' conference, do you think this framework can also inform, or how can it inform the work of the different commissions that are working in maybe not particularly in pastoral work, but in different areas, education, in different areas like you mentioned Caritas, social communications. How can this particular framework guide how we respond to the different needs of the church?
I think as we minister, one of the things we try and do is to let these different commissions reflect back to the church, what they hear wherever they are ministering. And this framework somehow says to us, if this has been done at the lowest level, then everyone has been listened to. And in particular, our bishops have identified the wealth that came out of the consultations made at the small Christian levels with the different groups in the church, and they have preserved that. They have urged the parishes to begin looking at what can be implemented at the local levels. And for me, that is very important because that says the synod is anchored on the ground.
Mm-hmm. This year, we are celebrating the 10th election anniversary of Pope Francis. As an individual, how much impact has he had on your worldview, on your view of your job as a priest? but also on the view of how the church should function?
I think what Pope Francis has given to us, and maybe this is going to be his legacy, he has spoken in a pastoral tone, something that might have been missing in the past years. He is very pastoral minded, and he attends and attempts to speak to the issues that maybe academically people would have said, let's shelve them. But he has dared to rock the boat and to steer the ship towards those areas and to remind us that pastoral work can be messy.
And how do you think that view of that pastoral mission can shape, say, how the local church has been ministering to people, or how it should respond to the demands of the times of?
I think what he has done is to bridge the gap between the academic and the pastoral. And he says, even if we are doing academics, let us begin from the reality itself. And let us allow the reality to inform us. And that on its own is in the church. If you follow his documents, he is more or less nudging us to reflect on the environment. He is urging us to reflect on those who do not meet the standard. When you look at Amoris Laetitia, and he says to us, yes, we have a standard. We have people who live in different situations, but we have also people who fall short of that benchmark we have put. So can we do something in a pastoral manner to attend to them?
There's always a difficult question about when Pope Francis is teaching and when he is, advising bishops, when he's advising the church. How does that, what his teachings, his advice on pastoral mission, how much impact does it have on the local bishops, on how the church is run administratively?
He is speaking the language that says, be closer to your sheep. And in a way, is urging our local pastors to be in touch with the reality, to listen to the people on the ground, to be informed of what's happening in their dioceses, in their parishes. And that dimension on its own shapes how pastoral ministry evolves.
So in a way, it's not giving an order to the local bishops?
He's not giving an order, but he is maybe saying even to the bishops, this is what it means to be a pastor. And in so doing, he demonstrates it. I think that's one thing that comes out so powerful from Pope Francis. He rolls his sleeves. He's in touch. I think this can be captured in his first document, not the one he completed on faith, but the one where he speaks of Evangelium Gaudium. In that document, and like all other documents of the previous popes, the first document is important because it more or less gives us the vision of the incoming pope. He says the church that he prefers is one that is dirty, that is like a field hospital where people's wounds are nursed. A church that is not obsessed with itself or with its structures. And he calls for an evaluation of the structures. And he admits that some of the structures, they were good in themselves and good in a certain era, but maybe they have served their purpose, and we ought to revisit them and see whether they are still worth keeping.
And speaking about structures, that's one of your important duties, to make sure that the church has got good structures. How dirty are we? How good are our structures in responding to the needs of the people?
There are certain areas where we have got it right. There are certain areas where we have lost it. And I think when we speak of the abuses, unfortunately, in the church, committed by people of high rank, some of them within the church. The reality is, on that side, we failed. So what he is now saying to us is, yes, maybe some of those abuses came to us because of those structures. Do we still need those structures that perpetuate abuse?
You mentioned issues to do with responding to the abuses, and that is what that is one of the Pope's prayer intention, particularly for March. The church has launched child protection and safeguarding policies. How can we strengthen this so that we, at least in the future, we avoid further abuses?
I think policies are a step towards avoiding further abuses. Once we have written the policies, the next step is to try and implement those policies. Let them be a lived out reality, so that all our institutions, in a way, can uphold those policies. And in so doing, we curb abuses and we prevent abuses.
February 22, the Bishops' Conference released a pastoral letter for Lent with a very strong message towards the forthcoming general election in Zimbabwe. Who is this pastoral letter addressed to?
First and foremost, it is addressed to all Catholics in the land, but it is not confined to them. It's also addressed to all men and women of goodwill, the citizens of the nation.
And what are the bishops saying? What do they want the people to do?
Yes, we have to understand the pastoral letter in the context of the season in which we are, the holy season of Lent. It's a time of reflection. It's a time of conversion. And it's a time of preparing ourselves for the resurrection. And as they say, there is no death without a resurrection, and there is no resurrection without death. And what the bishops are inviting us to do is, yes, we have lived our lives as a nation, as Christians. There are certain things that we have done well, and there are certain things that we have messed up. Can we reflect on those things and see what we have done right? And they help us to do that reflection. They point out certain areas where we have failed as a nation and as a people, and they call us to repentance. I think the first verse that they quote is very much telling. Break the yoke. Do away with injustice. Clothe those who are naked and give shelter to the homeless. And this is a responsibility of every citizen, and this is a responsibility of every government.
Many people wonder or ask how the church interacts with power. And bishops are often accused for not doing enough, representing the people, telling the truth, speaking the truth to power. And I know this is one of your jobs, coordinating how the bishops work. How can you explain how the church interacts with power or with authorities?
Well, I suppose by authorities you mean the civil government?
Yes.
And if it comes to the civil government, I think we have a relationship. There is so much going on between the government and the church. Maybe it does not get the publicity like the pastoral letters. And when people see the pastoral letters, they tend to think they are directed to the government. No, they are directed to the citizens of the country. They may speak issues that pertain to the government, but everyone else is not exempt. The way the church interacts with the civil government is through engagement and dialogue.
And now that the pastoral letter is out there calling people to participate in elections, to choose people, the leaders they want, but also have a clear voice, what do you think Catholics should start doing now before the election?
The bishops speak of the things that they are worried about. One of them is violence. And they call for tolerance. And they also say to us, this is a sacred opportunity when we choose the leaders that we want. And when we are choosing the leaders that we want, let us not be selfish. Listen to your conscience. As you choose leaders, listen to your conscience. What are the leaders that we want? And we can only get to answer that question when we can tick some boxes. We want leaders who are accountable to the people who elect them. We want leaders who will, in a way, guide the process of development. We want leaders who have the people at heart. The church is never going to say that particular leader has the people at heart. But the church has a responsibility of instructing us or guiding us in terms of how can we get that process of discernment to lead us to an election that will save us as a nation.
Okay. There are dioceses that have gone long without a bishop, Gokwe, and then also the Diocese of Masvingo currently has an apostolic administrator following the resignation of Bishop Basera. What is happening? Are we to expect any bishops anytime soon?
I think we live in hope and expectation. That they will get a bishop is certain. When we do not know. There are processes, and I think the nunciature is very much involved in those processes. But let us also consider that it's the Vatican that appoints bishops. And you can imagine the congregation that has to deal with bishops, how inundated it is with trying to find bishops for particular churches. I'm sure our turn will come.
Thank you very much, Father Tryvis. But before we conclude, what is your advice to people working in different commissions, to people working in different departments of the church? And also, lastly, what would be your advice to the general faithful of Zimbabwe?
My advice will be, we all have been entrusted with a treasure, and that treasure is faith. Can we be good stewards? We speak of evangelization, and it takes many forms. But I think each and every one of us has that mandate to evangelize. And for it to be credible, people will have to see us as witnesses. Men and women who in their engagements, in whatever areas they find themselves, are great witnesses to the gospel as given to us by our Lord Jesus Christ.
Father Tryvis, thank you very much for coming on Catholic Focus. And there you have it with Father Tryvis Moyo, the Secretary General of the Zimbabwe Catholic Bishops' Conference in Zimbabwe. Thank you for watching and for sharing this episode. Please continue to subscribe and also to share our episodes. For now, it's bye.